All right, well, we're about to see Gravity, and I've actually already seen it, which is good because then I can spoil it for them, and I like doing that. So, what do you guys think?
So I'm really excited to see this movie. I've intentionally not heard anything about it, so I'm going in not expecting anything except for George Clooney, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, bad nipples in space.
Pretty much.
I've heard a little bit about it. A lot of praise coming from sort of the film people and the artsy crowd there. I haven't heard too much from just audience reviews, but I'm interested, though I'm a little worried. I'm not sure. I'm curious as to how you make a whole movie out of this kind of a thing, but that's just kind of the standard disaster movie complaint or what have you. So we'll see. Could be really good.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. Today we're going to talk about Gravity, a film starring George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, who play two astronauts stranded in space after a satellite catastrophe destroys their ship, and they have to find a way to get back. So, what did you guys think?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was really surprised. I was expecting kind of more of an Apollo 13 sort of situation where you have the initial catastrophe and that's pretty much just it. But they managed to keep the suspense constantly building with every new challenge arriving from this initial catastrophe, then hit every single stage of where this movie went. They managed to go to one thing that would look like it was going to save them, and there would be some damage to that. The next thing that they thought might save them, there's damage to that. So there's a constant progression happening, but you're never out of the woods. And there's constantly these new challenges coming up as you go. And I was really impressed with that. I was afraid that it would have sort of that standard disaster movie flaw where you have this one issue that's happening and that's it. But they managed to constantly have little things connected to that, which managed to make me feel more invested in the character, feel the danger constantly, and not get bored.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it was just that, like, the environment was so immersive that,
yes,
and just like the way that they had to do basic things was so different. Like, I mean, even when it's just as simple as like grabbing onto a rail, it was just that much more difficult because they're in a zero gravity environment, and so that really immersed you in that, and that kind of made what could have been really, really slow and boring just really exciting. So
yeah, totally. No, along those lines, I really, for me, I really enjoyed that the movie has this disaster, but that's not even the main focus. The main focus is these characters' experiences, and especially Sandra Bullock's character and how she has this almost like spiritual religious experience being so close to death constantly. Like you said, how the beauty of these movies where all these little details really matter. I went to this movie expecting a nice like visual thrill because that's what I've been telling everyone. Like, oh, it's beautiful, but it's not just about the visuals. It's about like what the visuals mean. So like they don't just place things that be like, oh, nice, it's a pretty view of the Earth. The movie has these little snippets of like life, of experience, of spirituality. It's really interesting. All this little commentary it makes without saying anything. Even the audio with how constant the movie is silent. Really interesting. The commentary it's making on like life itself through silence.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the main character. Let's start with Sandra Bullock's character. Her name is Ryan Stone. That's explained in the movie, but so yeah. What did we think about Sandra Bullock's character?
You want to go with that one? I've got some for Matt, but
I thought she was fantastic. I thought her character was very well written. She had a backstory there that you could see before it was even explained. You could feel the isolation and the loss that probably was the cause of that isolation in her.
Yeah, with Sandra Bullock with her character's backstory, she had a young daughter who died, and you really do, she really, since then, it's this kind of thing where it's like, in a sense, she's kind of given up the will to live, but the only reason why she's still alive is because she's afraid to die.
Yeah.
And it's this sort of thing where she's just sort of like kind of trucking along in life.
Enduring.
And enduring. And you really, really feel that just from the beginning because she seems so, not boring, but really blasé.
Well, even at the very beginning, she keeps cutting through the casual stuff to get folks in the job.
Exactly.
Like there's the other astronaut who I don't remember. He dies. Sharif. Yeah. And him and Clooney and Houston are just talking. She wants to cut through it. Turn off the music. Can you stop? I need to put this through. Like you're saying, like she has this very work
zeroed
sense,
in there.
She wants to kind of escape. It feels like escape her reality, escape her experiences, but also like you said, not die simultaneously. Like she wants to live, but she doesn't have a reason to.
Yeah,
really interesting.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is that that really the whole main conflict really mirrors internally, where she's in space the whole time and it's empty, but she sort of felt like the world was that empty even when she was on Earth.
Yeah. Which is why she can't see the beauty that George Clooney's character sees.
Exactly, yeah. Right. And let's talk about George Clooney's character, because I had kind of an interest, because I've seen this twice, and so this was my second time. And I had kind of an interesting experience, because the first time I thought he was a little too unbelievable, where I thought he was just, he's extremely happy-go-lucky, he's very content, he just, even in the most dire situations, he seems very calm and very reasoned and very measured, and just very, very content. And the first time, I thought that seemed very, just really unrealistic, and I felt like it kind of hurt him as a character. And yet this time around, I felt like I didn't fully understand the role he was having in the story as a whole with the themes. So,
Okay.
do you guys know what I'm talking about?
His character is actually my only big issue with this, movie.
Okay.
Because I can't help but see his character and how he interacts with Sandra Bullock's character and see the White Knight. Like, literally, the character is in all white throughout the entire movie, and whenever Sandra is in a super dire moment of desperation, he appears and rescues her.
Well, part of that is he's the veteran.
Sure, but that's also what I'm trying to get at is I feel like it's difficult to see only two characters, male and female, and to have the male one, even as the veteran, has the more experience rescuing the female throughout it.
Right. I think that was, to me, that felt like more of an age thing than it did a gender thing.
Okay.
Well, to me, I actually kind of saw the entire thing through the lens of he kind of represented like the ideal of the movie, and the overall message of the movie.
Certainly.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm just wondering.
He was much more at peace in that environment.
Yeah.
It was much more zen in that way.
Which and just to put that into perspective, the Sandra Bullock character's her sort of arc is that she starts off just sort of getting by without any real will, and then when she first has to struggle about what's going on around her, she's struggling against it, but in a kind of it's only because she's afraid to die, not because she wants to live. And then eventually, when what finally gives her the will to keep going on when it seems like all hope has been lost, is that she gets this desire to live again. Yeah. And that's what she finds neat. And that seems to be what George Clooney's character, what he really represents, because he's a guy who just enjoys life.
Yeah. He keeps talking about life. He has every story, Houston's heard this one, but he's always telling stories, always wanting to hear stories. He asks, when they're carrying it through, he keeps asking her, tell me about your experience. What do you do at 8 p.m. On a Sunday night? Really interesting how he lives very much in the moment. Whenever he's looking at Earth, he's just stop and look. Look how beautiful this is. Look at the sunset. He gets kind of caught up in the moment and lives life from the day to day.
Well, and I think about that one of the last scenes you see him, which is where he's he basically sacrifices himself to save Sandra Bullock's character, to save Ryan. And as he's floating off, what he does, he turns he has a sort of a music device in his suit so he can listen to music. And so as he's just floating off, he's talking to her very calmly, and he's just listening to music.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of thing where I get the impression that like you said, that was his last mission. It's I feel like he's ending that mission, in that way with the same attitude as he would even if it had gone well. Huh. It's like he's just has this great contentment with the way life is. Mm-hmm. Even through the good and through the bad.
Right. I almost wanted to say he's ending it on his terms, but he's not.
He's
completely not, but he's accepted it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's willing to accept whatever terms that it ends.
Well, even the moment where he realizes that he can't hold on to her, that if he holds on, they both will die.
Yeah.
He doesn't panic or anything. He doesn't even look worried. He looks like this is unfortunate. He accepts the consequences immediately and chooses to die. Really interesting, especially when compared to Sandra Bullock when she enters Earth, and she has that monologue where she says, like in the next 10 minutes, either I'll burn up in here or I'll be touching down on Earth. Either way, it's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
Like really interesting perspective of just saying like this is the moment. Like this is like I need to accept this is going to happen and move on. As George Clooney's character says at that point when he lets go, he says you need to let go. Like not just to the rope that's holding him on for dear life, but also to like her sense of self-preservation for no purpose. Like she needs to let go of either that or like let go and have a purpose again.
Which and going on that note, an interesting thing. I mean, like so much of what we've talked about with the themes and stuff so far, it's all about Earth and life. And, do you think this is? It almost seems almost like the movie is like anti-technology.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any merit to that interpretation?
I can see it. Like for me, like it's kind of interesting how the entire movie, like the vast majority of the movie, does take place in space with technology. However, the movie opens up with those lines about like what space is like, the temperature. There's no oxygen.
It uses the line. The line was, I think, life is impossible.
Life is impossible. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Where it's just, and then it shows the consequence of life going where it kind of doesn't belong.
Yeah.
How people die in a heartbeat. How like George Clooney's character and Sandra Bullock's character throughout the rest of their experiences in the movie are constantly on the edge. Like their life is so vulnerable. Really interesting. And then to have her enter Earth again when she crashes. The water floods in, and she has to escape the pod, which is humanly made. Yeah. And when she's out of that, she's not safe either because she can't surface because of her suit, which is humanly made. She has to basically disrobe herself, like remove her, like not like humanity per se, but like the technologies of man to be able to join nature,
sort of becoming naked at that point, and returning to a natural state.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think about just the condition in space where there's such an inherent isolation to it.
Yeah.
Where really, she's only able to ever interact with George Clooney, through these massive rubber suits.
Yeah. Right. And I think that you really feel the isolation in two ways. One is just seeing her drifting out there alone in that expanse of space, which was incredible. But then also the getting her in her perspective and being inside the suit, the shots were incredible. And you felt so claustrophobic and isolated, and it was overwhelming. The way they were able to do both.
Well, yeah, like I mean, like in the space station, like it felt so fundamentally unnatural.
Yeah,
and not just in the literal sense, but it just felt like how can a human being live in here?
Right.
Well, whenever she enters any of the space station places, you just feel like uncomfortable. You feel like something's going to go wrong.
Yeah,
and things do. They do because they're human. Like they're humanly made technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's
which
really
can be broken, which can be damaged, and which has been damaged.
In fact, whenever the characters or the camera views Earth, there's almost like the sense also like longing to return to the nature. It's really interesting, especially with Clooney's like final line talking about have you ever seen the sunrise? And just how that's like the last thing he ever says.
Exactly.
Drifts off.
It's like everything beautiful about this movie is Earth related, even though it's mostly in space.
That's interesting. The distance there has increased sort of the beauty of Earth.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
the characters.
It's like because they're one step further, like because they aren't connected to it anymore, it becomes beautiful.
It's interesting. They've kind of gone on this journey out into space where they're doing this exploration of that, and yet they end up longing more for his home.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
the beauty of
the movie starts with them repairing the Hubble telescope, which is about exploring the vastness of space.
Which can I speak on that?
Oh yeah, go for it
for 1 second. In regards to the whole technology versus nature themes, there, part of me felt like that was a lens for something else. The technology was all about study and exploration and this movie kind of explored sort of the futility of some of that and how that ends up being very self-destructive. And in that way, it felt a lot like a cosmic horror piece, but without sort of the supernatural elements.
Yeah.
And I found that very interesting that they could do that.
Sure.
But in a way, it ended up being sort of you keep on trying to explore, you keep on getting away from things, you're delving deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's actually threatening to you. And this almost, it becomes sort of an almost epistemological horror at that point, which I found very fascinating. And doing that with the lens of nature and technology is interesting because then it's sort of the forbidden knowledge almost kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because the thing where they're searching for knowledge elsewhere, but in the end, what gives her hope is Earth.
Yeah,
and sort of that return to what you're meant for.
Yeah.
And it's just a very, very interesting connection there. And I thought it worked very, very well with a movie that was basically jumping through all of these different philosophical viewpoints and trying to find its own space.
Yeah. certainly. The movie's very like spiritual with its imagery.
Yeah. I felt like you were going on a journey through an almost not caring agnosticism to a very threatened sort of nihilistic standpoint, to sort of to a religious sort of a deist space where you still have the evolutionary sort of worldview, but with a very opened up,
maybe even a pantheon sort of
maybe, especially with these nature elements.
Yeah, especially with the Buddhism and the Orthodox saint.
I mean,
iconography.
She even ends up giving an almost Pascal's wager sort of thing there at the end, where she's like, either there's nothing or I live.
Yeah,
and she's able to just go either way. That's pretty great.
Yeah. In the film, Sandra Bullock, she goes at one point she goes to a nearby floating Russian space station, and then next she goes to a Chinese station. And in each area, they have a very prominent shot of first a Russian Orthodox icon, and then a statue of Buddha. And so there's obviously just very deliberate spiritual imagery.
Yeah,
which are placed
on the same place on both escape pods.
Exactly. Oh yeah,
it was
the
really common humanity there was just fantastic.
Which another thing I just thought about is I'm not sure how deliberate this is, but you have Russia and you have China. Those are traditionally very very secular.
Very secular.
Yeah, very forcibly secular countries, and yet you still have spiritual. You still have spiritual themes shown as coming from their cultures.
Yeah, it was interesting, more so than the Americans of what we saw.
I hadn't thought about. The prominent image from America is Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, that's good because that floats out of the ship.
Which kind of feels like the cosmic horror thing again, is the alien presence, but but also that belittling. It's a cartoon, whereas these people are holding onto this more extensive history with religious significance.
Yeah,
interesting.
And I just genuinely found that fascinating because normally when you think of Russians and Americans in space, you think of the Cold War tensions.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of this going on there. You think of, okay, here in space, all of these borders and these political theories and whatnot, those all kind of disappear when you're in this sort of danger zone. And all humans are human, and there are these basic needs, survival, the sort of evolutionary factors and the religious factors that happen there. As part of the story.
There's a real like an anti-isolationism inherent to it.
Yes. It's very, very prevalent in the movie, and just you get those commonalities, but I didn't expect that what would carry over would be the religious elements, especially coming from something like the Russian and the Chinese, where you would expect it to be in isolation. But no, if anything, it's the Americans who don't have that sort of element in their science and their exploration. There's still this innate human quality that's going on that you see more from these other cultures.
Yeah. So reflecting on the spirituality of the movie and the technology versus nature, I really found it interesting that it's kind of a commentary on American spirituality, whereas, like I said earlier, it seems like they're praying to Houston, which is like this idea of praying to NASA or technology, and when that's cut from them, they have nothing. So it's like this dependency on technology, whereas we have the other countries have this like other spirituality they can rely on, and to sum it up, it feels like with her return to Earth, with her return to and landing this place, there's no human life. It's all natural. It feels like there's this calling of sense of to like forsake technology certainly, but like this return to a spirituality that is not technology based. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so what about this movie's future? Like we've seen a lot of really just like technologically really great movies like I think Avatar, which had amazing visuals. I liked it mostly because of the visuals. Yeah. And yet and it ended up being the highest grossing movie ever made. And yet now, how many years, I don't even remember when it came out exactly, but no one really seems to, not many people seem to care about it anymore.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, do you think, is that something that might happen to this? I mean, a lot of the things that people are just going nuts about is how good the effects are. But do you think that, the themes, do you think they're universal enough that they're still going to be in our culture after people are over the effects?
Well, I think that the themes have been in our culture already, and that was one of the strengths of the movie, was it was picking up on all of these very innate human concerns and elements. But it's interesting that you bring up Avatar, because that's another one that had this sort of nature and technology and discovery kinds of themes there. But it was much more superficial for the sake of an adventure story. This one, the desperation and the way that it used its imagery really pulled all of those things to the front and let you sit in them and explore those different themes in a way that you just can't get in Avatar, which both were trying to tell a story, but one was the sci-fi, fantasy, epic adventure story, and this one just kind of let you sit with those characters in this environment with these images, which let you experience these different philosophies and concerns on a level that you just didn't get to do in Avatar. So whether or not it's going to endure, the themes certainly should, and they have up until this point. And I think that this was a new way to do those themes and a new way to explore them. And so hopefully some of that hangs on. I think that the effects were good enough that it's certainly going to last a while. Whether it gets to be as popular or to stick around as some classics do, I'm not sure. But it certainly seems to merit it more than certain movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know. I personally, I'd love to see this sort of be. I'm not sure if I'd call it as good, but I'd love to see it put in the same category as like 2001. You know, because it really does. It does. It's just another example of how you know, you can use effects to tell a story and to communicate the themes so effectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about the mini? I mean, what do you think was trying to be communicated
So
here?
I feel like this movie is a really good example of how to express storytelling through a heavily visual medium, like movies are. Because the movie doesn't just use special effects to get people there; it uses special effects to comment on the story itself.
Well, and I think that's part of the interesting point, because I mean, I feel like with me, you know, I mean, I'm more writing oriented. I know you are as well, and I am kind of sort of stuck in the rut where I'm thinking, okay, my story, it starts with characters, so it usually starts with like dialogue or just you know, sort of base situations and how the characters react. But here it felt much more. It was like the world. It wasn't the story wasn't really told through the characters in an environment. It was the environment was telling the story with the characters.
Almost like the environment and its consequence on characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So okay. So you know, any final thoughts?
No, I think we pretty much summed up what I had to say. I think it was beautiful.
Fair enough. I guess I'll sign up by saying I think it's very safe to say there's a lot more going on in this movie than there was in Transformers. and on that note, we'll close out.
Nice.
Thanks for stopping by.
See ya.